Hey everyone, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And full disclosure, I recorded this Saturday afternoon, so if something major happens, I will catch it next week. But before I begin, as always, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me messages, tagged me, linked me, whatever it was to get me a good chunk of this information. And that is Jacqueline Wolf, Jason Dance, David Walker, and Ron Craig. Guys, it's always appreciated. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it along my way, and I will give you a shout out as well. Let's start with the Medicis Health Group to dive right in. They had a ransomware hit involving personal information of about 60,000 of their clients. Names, contact information, provincial health numbers, and test results were exposed, but they are saying that financial information and social insurance numbers were not affected. I believe this is out of Canada, so heads up there if you use Medicis Health Group. Next up, I want to give you a quick update on Blackbaud. If you have been consistently watching my Breaches of the Week video or podcast every Sunday, you know that Blackbaud has been weeks and weeks and weeks, or months rather, of disclosures because they had a massive hit and all the companies that were affected are now disclosing. But this week, terrifyingly, Blackbaud is disclosing more information. Here's what's going on. On Tuesday, they updated their statement with a disclosure that the cyber criminal or attackers did in fact access bank details, passwords, and social security numbers for some of the affected organizations. And to quote their new disclosure, there were situations where some fields intended for social security numbers, bank account information, usernames, and or passwords were not encrypted for certain customers. So there you go. If you're part of the Blackbaud breach, heads up, you might be affected even more deeply than you previous thought. And this week's company that is disclosing this to the world is Innova Health. I'm not saying they have their passwords hit, but they are definitely part of that breach. So heads up if you have anything to do with Innova Health. Moving on. Let's talk about Pell City, Alabama, because some customers who pay the city of Pell City via a paper check for the utility bills may have had their data breached, according to their city and Valley Bank. Now, the municipality has been informed by Valley Bank that some of the city's customers may have had their data breached, specifically those that were using lockbox services. And to quote a statement from the bank, one of our third-party service providers experienced a security breach. This incident was not a result of a breach of Valley security systems. We are working closely with this third-party service provider to alert affected customers. Seems like maybe one of these lockboxes was broken into in some way, shape, or form. So heads up to you, basically, if you live in the city of Pell. Moving on, let's talk about massive French shipping carrier CMA CGM. They revealed that they suffered a data breach during a recent cyber attack. Now, as they are working to restore their systems, they said, and I quote, "We suspect a data breach and we're doing everything possible to assess its potential volume and nature." The company also said that it disabled external access to its IT applications to prevent the malware from spreading. Obviously, that's a very massive problem because they are shipping cargo around the globe. Huge issue. So heads up to you if you have anything to do with them, whether you're a customer or an employee. Moving on, let's talk about Kylie Cosmetics. Apparently this is Kylie Jenner or Kylie Kardashian, whichever one, what her last name is. I really don't follow them. But they are warning customers, Kylie Cosmetics, is warning customers in an email blast that its e-commerce platform Shopify, which I actually mentioned last week, experienced a data breach, potentially compromising Kylie Cosmetic customers' names and addresses, as well as the last four digits of their credit cards. If you recall last week's breach, I mentioned Shopify having hundreds, about 200-300 stores or so, online stores hit. Kylie Cosmetics apparently was one of those. Moving on, I'm going to give you an update on Premera. If you recall, this is a Washington-based health insurer, Premera Blue Cross, and they will now pay $6.85 million in fines to resolve a data breach that could have exposed more than 10 million people's health information. Now, this is a HIPAA fine, and it would be the second largest paid to the Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights to date. Now, according to the HHS, attackers used a phishing email in 2014. This is how long it's taken to resolve this. In 2014, to install malware that gave them access to Premera's systems, they were reportedly able to access members' names, addresses, social security numbers, bank account information, and clinical information from their health plans. The breach wasn't discovered until January of 2015, 9 months later, and obviously they have been going through a lot of court, everything's for the last 5.5+ years. So Heads up, if you have Primera or did have Primera, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on, let's talk about DFAT. This is out of Australia. This is the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. They admitted they inadvertently revealed the email addresses of 2,727 vulnerable Australians stranded overseas in a data breach that has been labeled as, and this is very Australian, a complete stuff-up. Very cool. Now, the addresses, well, not cool for the breach, but I like the phrase. The addresses were included in an email sent to multiple recipients before midday on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, by the COVID-19 Consular Operations section of DFAT. Now, the message notified recipients that interest-free loans were available, and I quote, for the most vulnerable Australian citizens whose return to Australia has been impacted by the restrictions arising from COVID-19. So if you're an Aussie, and you're not in Australia right now because you're stuck due to COVID-19, you probably had your email address and other stuff exposed. Heads up. Moving on, let's talk about Swatch Group. These are the watchmakers that go back for forever. They shut down some of their technology systems after detecting a cyber attack over the last weekend. Apparently, they're the world's biggest watchmaker, according to my notes here. Now, to quote them, Swatch Group confirms that it has identified clear signs of a developing cyber attack on some of its IT systems during the weekend. And again, that's according to their statement. And so they ran a shutdown of those systems. And obviously, they're doing that out of precautions and all of that. And so they're saying that the situation will return to normal as soon as possible. And that's all we know at this point. So heads up if you have anything to do with Swatch, apparently the biggest watchmaker on the planet. Moving on, let's talk about a couple of different flight tracking websites because they're apparently under attack, which is amazing because very few people are flying today. But Flight Radar 24 and Plane Finder had their services disrupted after consecutively suffering multiple cyber attacks. Now, Flight Radar 24 was attacked 3 times in 2 days. Plane Finder was attacked multiple times, according to my sources here, and Plane Finder took to Twitter to confirm the news and asked its users to remain patient while they are trying to fix the issue. And so heads up if you use Flight Radar 24 or Plane Finder. I don't know if your data will be breached, if you even have an account there, but they may be out of service for a while, so you cannot track airplanes, I guess. Moving on. Let's talk about the Minnesota Department of Health and the Minnesota Department of Safety, because in April, Governor Tim Walz signed an executive order allowing the department to share addresses of COVID-19 patients with first responders across Minnesota, obviously in an attempt to keep the first responders safe and not infected because they are on the front lines of this pandemic. The governor imposed strict guidelines for sharing those addresses to protect the liability of Minnesotans with COVID-19. Now, both departments also set up protocols that require the addresses to be sent via encrypted emails, but the only one that basically could get this was 9/11 dispatch centers close to where the patients lived. But according to local Channel 5 Eyewitness News out of St. Paul and Minneapolis, they obtained internal city and state documents which show there have been numerous times, starting in August, where those protocols were simply not followed and the privacy of the addresses of COVID-19 patients were compromised. So that is potentially a HIPAA breach for the state of Minnesota, both of those departments, and we'll see what happens there. But this was one of the concerns that we had when we found out very early in March or early April that this kind of stuff was happening, not just Minnesota, but statewide. And I have to imagine there's going to be a lot of lax departments out there across all 50 states. So heads up, Minnesotans, with COVID-19, your government may have exposed your address. Moving on, let's talk about international insurance brokerage firm Arthur J. Gallagher and Company. They are huge. They confirmed that they were a target of a ransomware attack on September 26. Now, the firm said the incident impacted a limited portion of its internal systems and does not expect to have a material impact on its operations or financial condition. And following the attack, Arthur J. Gallagher also restarted most of their business systems internationally. And so hopefully this is something that they thwarted, and I didn't hear anything about data being breached. But heads up if you use or work for Arthur J. Gallagher. Moving on, let's talk about Las Vegas area students, because an attacker just published documents containing social security numbers, student grades, and other private information stolen from a large public school district in Las Vegas after officials refused a ransom demand and basically to unlock their systems. They obviously restored from backups or got themselves running in whatever way, refused to pay the attackers, and so the attackers went ahead and dumped all that data out into the public. So heads up to you if you have a student or are a student in the Las Vegas area. I do not know which school district it is, and I don't think that we're making that public specifically just to give you some kind of modicum of privacy. Moving on, let's talk about the Montgomery County government in Tennessee. And I quote a spokesperson, access to the county's network is currently unavailable as a result of a data security incident we recently discovered. That was last Sunday morning. Now, the 911 center operations were not affected by this shutdown, according to the director of the Montgomery County 911 Center. So hopefully they'll get back online. But heads up, if you live in Montgomery County, your services may be hindered, or rather your county services may be hindered. Moving on. Let's talk about Brandbq. This is a Polish online fashion retail company that also has physical outlets. And researchers from VPN Mentor have reported that they have a database leak discovered on June 28th of this year due to a misconfigured Elasticsearch server. Now, the users for Brandbq are located mainly in 7 Eastern European countries, such as Poland, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. The data exposed amounts to over 1 terabyte, basically, which is around 1 billion records, and includes a range of personally identifiable information of the company's customers, including full names, email addresses, phone numbers, and payment details without card numbers. But this is also not all, because confidential details of its local contractors have also been revealed, which goes way above and beyond what was previously mentioned. And that includes VAT numbers, payment methods, names of package receivers, and purchase information that is connected to orders, meaning those are probably going to be ripe for phishing. So heads up if you have anything whatsoever to do with Brandbq out of Poland. Moving on, let's head back here to the United States and go to California to talk about Cache Creek Casino. They had an external attack on computer systems, and basically they're blaming that for closing their Brooks Resort at this point, probably about 15 days ago or so. Now, a casino spokesperson reported this past Wednesday, that a major computer system disruption occurred, and that while the investigation is ongoing, it has been traced to, and I quote, external attack on our computer network. I actually just checked out their website on Saturday afternoon, and they had a huge thing about basically having an outage, if you will. So that's a huge thing. And so heads up to you if you have anything to do with the Cache Creek Casino in Northern California. Moving on, let's talk about Edureka, kind of like Eureka, but EDU, Edureka. This is an Indian ed tech platform. They reported to have suffered a server breach which compromised the data of more than 2 million of their users. Now, this vulnerability was with Edureka's US-based Elasticsearch server, which was left unsecured and without password protection. I swear to God, between AWS buckets and Elasticsearch servers, nobody really knows how to configure cloud security. So heads up if you use Edureka out of India. Moving on, we have to talk about Armenia and Azerbaijan's new armed conflict. And since this past Sunday, a week ago, Armenia and Azerbaijan have engaged in active warfare over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, basically, and they are rejecting pressure to hold peace talks. The two countries are now accusing each other of firing into each other's territory, and the conflict is spreading. And this will get technical here, because on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, a file package called Azerbaijan Navy 2020 started circulating on Russian forums. It contained 18,872 entries, and there are almost 10,000 unique citizens in this database. Now, the leaked data includes the Navy sailors' full names and surnames, dates of birth, passport numbers, and expiration dates. Some passports have already been expired, but some are valid until 2025, meaning it's all over the map here. This leaked data also contains a folder with sailors' headshot photos, and there are 18,872 photos in the folder, and the pictures are numbered. Now, there was also some women in this zipped up file as well, and the size of this file is 2 gigabytes and is protected with an easily guessable and conflict-related password. So pretty much if you want to know everybody in the Navy for Azerbaijan, that is obviously a very serious data breach for them, and hopefully they will reach a peaceful conclusion, because on top of active warfare, we're looking at cyber warfare as well. Moving on. Let's talk about the Ashtabula County Medical Center. This is a Cleveland area hospital, and they have spent more than a week offline after being hit by a cyber attack, forcing it to postpone all of its elective procedures. This attack appears to be ransomware, and I don't have much more information at this time, but heads up if you use Ashtabula County Medical Center in the Cleveland area in Ohio. Moving on, I want to give you guys an update on another Blue Cross Blue Shield massive data breach back in the day, and that is Anthem, because a multi-state settlement stemming from its massive 2014 data breach has ordered Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield to pay $39.5 million to states that are affected. And here are the states here's what the states are getting so far that I could find thus far. So Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin will receive $142,000, Hawaii $156,000, Nebraska $177,000, Idaho $175,618, Michigan gets $354,452.05. Don't know why they added a nickel there, but here we are. I'm sure that's a calculation. Massachusetts gets $1.4 million, Kentucky $1.93 million, New York $2.715 million, and Connecticut $3.8 million. And there will be more states that are declaring this as well. I believe Anthem was based out of Indiana, so I'm assuming Indiana will probably have the largest payout of all of this $39.5 million. But if you were back in the day an Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield member, you are probably going to get some compensation out of this, though don't expect it to be a lot. Moving on, let's talk about Spire Hospitality out of Vermont. On April 1, they had a business email compromise scam run on them, and I'm not sure what the data that got hit, because the disclosure didn't state it. This is the official disclosure from the state of Vermont's website that I found that was disclosed in this past week. I don't know much more, but if you use Spire Hospitality in Vermont, you might want to contact them. And finally, and we have a couple of different finalies, these are the big ones for the week, we are talking about Universal Health Services, and this is huge because ransomware has crippled their network basically, and they own hundreds of facilities, medical facilities across the United States. Now, in a Monday statement this past Monday, basically they're a publicly traded company out of King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, said, and I quote, "The IT network across Universal Health Service facilities is currently offline due to an IT security issue. We implement extensive IT security protocols and are working diligently with our IT security partners to restore IT operations as quickly as possible." The statement adds, and I quote again, "In the meantime, our facilities are using their established backup processes, including offline documentation methods. Patient care continues to be delivered safely and effectively. No patient or employee data appears to have been accessed, copied, or otherwise compromised." And we all hope that is really true, because they have 400 facilities and treat 3.5 million patients annually, and they are an $11 billion company as of 2019, probably worth more given that we are in the middle of a pandemic. And they have centers in the United States, Puerto Rico, and the UK. So heads up to all of you if you have anything to do with Universal Health Services, and there's at least 3.5 million of you that do. Moving on, our other finally, and I think this is actually really important. This is Hamilton County in Central Texas, and they have a very small government, 3 people in their office, and a phishing attack totally knocked them out. Now, this previously unreported attack on Hamilton County illustrates an overlooked security weakness that could actually hinder the 2020 election in November. The vulnerability of email systems in these small county offices that handle the voting process from registration to casting and counting ballots. Although the experts have repeatedly warned state and local officials to follow best practices for computer security, myself included, I literally just published an article about that, and I have another one that's going to be published ideally just before the election on major steps that we can take to secure the election. numerous smaller locales like Hamilton County appear to be taking few precautionary measures whatsoever. Oftentimes, these small groups just simply do not have the budget to hire cybersecurity professionals as contractors, and here we are. That is a very serious issue, because if we start seeing massive cyber attacks a day before the election or so that are knocking this out, that would throw the ballot counting into chaos, and I think that's a huge problem. And the other election security problem that we have right now, and this is the very last thing we're going to be talking about here, is voting machine programming, because multiple USB memory sticks and a laptop used to program voting machines in Philadelphia were stolen from a warehouse, and this is according to city officials this past Thursday. Now, it was not immediately clear when the materials were stolen, nor whether any machines had been compromised. Mayor Jim Kenney of Philadelphia said that law enforcement was investigating and that he was providing additional resources to strengthen security at the warehouse. Sounds like a good idea. Should have had that beforehand, though, and I will dive into that in my future article. And I did in my past one, too. But city election officials pledged that the theft would not disrupt the November election. And to quote the Mayor Kenney, this matter should not deter Philadelphians from voting, nor from having confidence in the security of this election. Now, the machine's manufacturer, ES&S, which is Election Systems and Software, who I have actually done reporting on before for very lax programming capabilities and physical security on their machines, said in a statement that the theft, and I quote, will not in any way compromise the integrity of the election. And according to Katina Granger, a spokesperson for ES&S, and I quote, the laptop did not hold any sensitive data related to the elections. It was not used to program the election or interact with USBs in elections. The USBs are encrypted and contain multiple levels of security. Upon learning of the theft, ES&S immediately changed the employee's corporate network user account, and the device address was blocked and passwords changed. Ms. Granger also noted the USBs, once programmed, are actually married to a specific machine, and so they could not be used, let's say, to reprogram another machine that it's not married to. All machines, once programmed, are then sealed until election day, and we've actually seen a whole bunch of competing information on that, about how easy it is to break into sealed machines. In fact, a colleague of mine, who I've never met for the record, but she's in cybersecurity, in under something like 90 seconds, was able with a ballpoint pen to simply pick the lock, pull out what she needed, boot up the machine, and then actually get into the programming of it. I don't know if that was an ES&S machine, but it was definitely an electronic voting machine. And I always take these things with a grain of salt, but it was not clear how many of these machines had already been programmed and sealed at the time of the theft, though. And basically, these machines record both a digital tally and a paper backup for each vote. Philadelphia bought 3,750 of these machines and first used them in an election year. And so that's obviously a very serious issue, because we have two major things that are going on right here. A small county potentially might have their election counting, not to mention registration, etc., disrupted due to cyber attack. And we also have physical theft of equipment in this. Now, I have said repeatedly that the election here in the United States is very confederated, that let's say a foreign hostile government wanted to disrupt this election by physically changing the vote total, they'd have to hit multiple machines that are not connected to the internet, or change paper ballots and all of that. That would take an army of people to do. But we do have these occasional random, something, lost here, or something stolen there, or some machine doesn't boot up, or something along those lines. That doesn't mean the election in itself is invalid and malfeasance in the election per every study, including the last commission study by the Heritage Foundation, and I believe that was actually sponsored by the Trump administration, found next to no malfeasance in past elections. And so the election, for the most part, is pretty secure, but we are walking into a new era where we may be able not just to disrupt an election, let's say through physical stealing, but through cyber attack as well, if the counties are not able to process the voting. And that's a huge issue, which is why I think I'm going to start doing an election security news of the week video in conjunction with breaches of the week. And I'm probably going to do these on Saturdays as well. It's going to take all the election security news that I can find from the US election and other elections around the world, because Lord knows we're not the only ones going through an election year. And I'm going to basically put that and aggregate that in the same way I'm doing breaches of the week, because I think, especially leading up to our election, that's a very critical issue, as it would be for any country that is soon to have possibly a new leader. So there we go. Those are your breaches of the week. Were you affected? I'm just going to go with yes once again this week because it's been another crazy week, but those are your breaches of the week. Take care.